All right, guys, so we have a potentially massive story breaking here. Now, before we get into anything, this is a story coming from a website called, wait, what is it called again? Cosmic Book News. I have absolutely no idea if this website is reliable. It's not Variety. It's not The Hollywood Reporter. It's not Deadline. It's not any of the major trades. So this is coming from a guy called Matt McGloin. Again, I have no idea what kind of track record this guy has, if he's broken scoops accurately in the past. Then fair enough. I cannot be effed keeping track of all of this stuff. So that's why I just always preface these types of videos by saying it's not coming from any of the major trades, so take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. So we're just going to talk about it, theoretically, talk about the broader situation regarding James Gunn and the DCU, and just have a good old time. But, don't take it to the bank, is all I'm saying. So the article is as such. James Gunn out at DC with Warner Brothers sale. With Superman reportedly bombing financially and with Peacemaker Season 2 flopping with fans, I reached out to my insiders about the state of the DCU under James Gunn. So already we have an interesting point of discussion here. To say that Superman flopped financially is just inaccurate. So there was a Forbes article that came out stating that the guy who wrote the article believes it to be the case that Superman did not profit theatrically. He doesn't have insiders that are telling him this, right, that are able to confirm this information. He just did movie math. That's not to discount movie math. Obviously, that's all we can really do. But this is obviously, disagreeing with a Variety article that came out a while ago that was written back in September, saying that Superman was expected to profit $150 something million. Those two articles are really the only articles from the major trades that we have to really be able to discuss this. So you have a guy who did some movie math on a napkin. Again, not trying to discredit it necessarily, but I'm just saying it's not actual confirmation of anything. And then we have a Variety article that is suggesting, based off of information that they have from their insiders, that the studio was expecting to make upwards of $100 million of profit. That tells us that even if the movie didn't profit theatrically, based off of, PVOD sales, based off of streaming revenue, based off of merchandising, based off of licensing deals, Superman it made a healthy profit. It was a success for Warner Brothers. I'm not sitting here trying to cape for, DC Studios. I'm just trying to point out that right off the bat, this article is a little sus. And they are purposefully trying to frame things as negatively as possible without providing full context of everything. So anyways, let's get back into it. Now, is Peacemaker Season 2 flopping with fans? Kind of, at least as far as my algorithm goes. Actually, let me check if the Rotten Tomatoes is updated since the season finale. Okay, so as you can see, it has a 78% audience score. Now, mind you, it has a 95% critic score, but that's mostly because James Gunn only sent critics the first 5 episodes. So it's possible that, if you got to the season finale and you're a critic, you might not have given it such a positive review. But even then, as a 78% audience score, clearly the finale did not cause an influx of people to bring the rating down. So I think people, generally speaking, enjoyed season 2, even if the finale was a little lackluster. Because, that's how I feel. Yes, was the finale of Peacemaker Season 2, it was paced weirdly. James Gunn way overhyped it. I don't know why he was insisting that there was a massive cameo near the end of the season. Everybody was assuming that Superman or somebody crazy was going to show up at the end of the season, but then nobody showed up. I think he drastically overhyped the fact that this is really going to heavily tie into Man of Tomorrow, when it's yeah, it kind of does, but not in a way that's fun or exciting. It was really more of an episode that focuses more on the emotion and the drama and the themes of the season. And those things I liked a lot, which is why at the end of the day, I liked the episode and I overall liked the season. But there's definitely a lot of people that are disappointed with it. The short of it is that James Gunn will be out as the head of DCU with the Warner Brothers Discovery sale. I'm told if David Ellison of Skydance Paramount buys Warner Brothers, that Mike DeLuca will be in charge of DC and do a completely new start. Whether or not this guy actually has credible sources that are telling him this isn't the most unbelievable thing in the world, right? David Ellison, the way that he's running Paramount right now, especially what we saw with Stephen Colbert, clearly he seems to be like in the pocket of the Trump administration. And I could totally see, when you look at the fact that Superman was very like, it's the story of an immigrant. We saw James Gunn blatantly come out in the midst of all the controversy, say that Superman is an immigration story. He explicitly said that he's an illegal immigrant. When you look at Creature Commandos, obviously, you have G.I. Robot that likes to kill Nazis. In Peacemaker season 2, yeah, you have the Nazi dimension. It's like, clearly James Gunn is like very anti-Nazi. He's pretty left-wing when it comes to his immigration policies, at least when you look at Superman and the way that he promoted the movie. James Gunn is obviously very progressive. I could see him not wanting James Gunn in charge. Now, maybe that's not necessarily what's going to happen. It would be a disaster, I think, to replace James Gunn and do a completely fresh reboot. Like, to reboot the DCU again would be insane. Like, that would be a disaster, I think. That would break the camel's back of, I think general audiences would be like, what? What are you saying? We're going to get another new Superman. But, I mean, something else that could happen is they just get rid of James Gunn and they continue with David Corenswet and Nicholas Hoult. And, if James Gunn casts a new Batman and a new Wonder Woman by that point, continue with those characters, but just, get rid of James Gunn. They could do that. That is what they did with Zack Snyder's cast. So that is another possibility, to be fair. Gunn recently said he is doing whatever he wants with DC. That sounded odd to me, as if you are building a new universe, you would want it to be successful with the fans. See, again, this article is just really weird. Like, first of all, he didn't even quote what James Gunn said, so I'd like to know what specific quote he's mentioning, where he's insinuating that James Gunn said that he wouldn't do what fans want, but only what he wants. It's like, I don't think it's one or the other. It's a very weird article. That's not happening, as both Creature Commandos and Peacemaker fail to chart on Nielsen. They don't have a big audience, and Gunn's claims that Peacemaker Season 2 was meant to be a sequel to his Superman movie was pure BS. So I don't necessarily disagree with the Peacemaker Season 2 being a sequel to his Superman movie. Like, that, I think I do remember that quote, and that is pretty nonsensical. But it's like this idea that, like, you have to be in the Nielsen top 10 charts in order to be deemed as a success. It's like, Creature Commandos is a niche animated series. It's fine for it not to chart on the Nielsen top 10. Peacemaker is also a niche series. It is a spin-off of the Suicide Squad, which bombed at the box office. When you watch the show, it's clearly not an expensive show. There's not like a ton of action in it. It's mostly like people talking and stuff. I don't think they were expecting it to chart in like the top 10 of the Nielsen charts, and it does what they need it to do. Superman also failed to resonate with international fans. Its box office also came in under Zack Snyder's Man of Steel by a large margin. So this is obviously true. The reason why it was a success was because of the United States box office. Like, we in America, we made Superman a success. International audiences, they failed us. There are a lot of reasons why that could be the case. Obviously, there is just your general comic book movie fatigue. I think people are just becoming less and less interested in comic book movies. I think there is specifically DC movie fatigue. If you look at the latter half of the DCEU, I mean, those movies were complete and utter disasters, with like The Flash making $200-something million, Black Adam making $300-something million, like Blue Beetle making like $100-something million, Shazam, Fury of the Gods making $100-something million. It's like, wow, great. Aquaman 2 made like $400-something million. It's like, it was a disaster. Like, audiences had just completely lost faith in DC. And so I feel like within that context, I feel like unless you're completely and utterly delusional, it would not have been fair for the standard for Superman 2025 success to have been, this movie needs to make $800 to $1 billion in order for us to deem it a success. Because the reality is that Superman is not Batman. He's not Spider-Man. He's not this like super popular character. Is he iconic? Do people know what Superman is? Yes, but I don't think he's a character that's going to be immune to comic book movie fatigue. I think that the job of James Gunn's Superman movie was to start getting people interested in A, Superman, and B, DC, and C, comic book movies in general again. It is to start curing people of comic book movie fatigue. That was the job of this movie. And I think by that metric, Superman succeeded in doing that. You know, people generally like Superman. Obviously, it has its detractors, but I think people in the general audience like Superman. Like, I always use my sister as a metric for what general audiences think. And our entire lives, I've always remembered she just thought that Superman was boring. Like, she just thought he was a boring character. James Gunn's Superman won her over. She was like, oh, Superman is actually a fun character. I like Superman now. That's what that movie needed to do. I think it succeeded in doing so. The fact that it made money for them, in my opinion, is a cherry on top. They bring up it didn't make as much money as Man of Steel. It's like, by the way, I think Man of Steel, I think they should have seen that as a success. Even back then, the old people that were at Warner Brothers, they viewed Man of Steel as a disappointment. I think that's completely unreasonable because, as I said before, I don't think that Superman is a character that is as popular as Batman or Spider-Man. So I think them starting off their new DCEU with a Superman movie that made like $600 million and whatnot, I think that's totally a good start. But of course, they didn't think so, and then they meddled with Zack Snyder's projects, and that turned into a complete other disaster. But it's like, if we're going to say that Superman is a failure, well, then you kind of got to say that Man of Steel was a massive failure, because it was coming out around the boom of the comic book movie industry, right? When comic books were the hot commodity in town. It was coming off a Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy, where like The Dark Knight Rises made over $1 billion. It was coming off of that first Avengers movie, which made $1 billion. It came off Iron Man, which made over $1 billion. So if we're going to play the comparison game, if we're going to sit here and not take into account, the context of where Superman comes from, and we're just going to compare it to other movies, I mean, you can do the same with Man of Steel and compare it to like the movies that were comic book movies that were coming out around it. Again, I don't think that's fair to do necessarily. But again, a lot of Snyder fans, they apparently don't, because they think that Superman was some massive disappointment, or that it should be considered some massive disappointment. Gunn's approach to the DCU has been all about divisive messaging. It's splitting the fan base. I mean, I could kind of agree with that if we're looking at the reaction to Peacemaker Season 2, because I do think that is the fault of James Gunn. I think when you promise certain things that are coming at the end of the season, and then you don't deliver on those promises, and then that action, then that your messaging there causes an autistic nerd war between like Snyder fans and Gunn fans, that is your fault. So I can't disagree with the article there. I am of the opinion that Gunn is doing whatever he wants with DC because his days are numbered and he knows it. So he's getting himself, all his friends, and his wife big paychecks before Warner Brothers Discovery sells. So he says, I am the opinion that Gunn is doing this. I don't know that specific insiders of his are telling him this, but okay. That means when a sale goes through, James Gunn is out. So I reached out to my Hollywood insiders. Here's what I'm told. Recently saw the big news that Mike DeLuca and Pam Abdy re-signed with Warner Brothers. In Deadline's report, they basically said it's because of the sale of Warner Brothers Discovery. David Ellison is looking to purchase Warner Brothers Discovery, so Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav is putting people in place that Ellison wants. That means Ellison wants DeLuca and Abdy in charge of Warner Brothers Films. That's just like one of those things that we can look at from the outside and say, I mean, that makes sense. If you are getting Warner Brothers in place for a sale, and you know that David Ellison wants Mike DeLuca and Pam Abdy in place, like, we can look at the fact that David Zaslav re-signed those guys and has not re-signed James Gunn. That is certainly evidence that points in that direction. Now, who knows? We could wake up tomorrow and David Zaslav might re-sign James Gunn and Peter Safran, and then this whole conversation is moot. But as of right now, that is direction that points to James Gunn potentially getting the boot. You'll notice that Gunn has pivoted from his planned Gods and Monsters storyline into what he calls his Superman family saga. The Superman family is all Gunn. The Gods and Monsters storyline is likely ditched because Gunn knows he can only get a select amount of movies out before the sale. I've also been told the reason why DCU projects have been stalling is because of Gunn's interference. The filmmakers want their own vision and not Gunn's. I'm told that most visionary directors in Hollywood are staying away from not only DC, but Marvel and Star Wars because life is too short and everyone is looking for original properties. I'm told Zack Snyder is happy doing his original stuff, but would only return to DC for one last movie, an adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns. So, I mean, that's something that is definitely reasonable to say. Oh, sorry. I wasn't showing you the article. I'll leave this up here for a bit if you want to read it. I mean, that's something that's fair to, honestly, for us to point out, right? It is true that James Gunn gave that initial slate. He has now pivoted from it, right? We have not seen The Authority. We have not seen The Waller Show. We have not seen Booster Gold. We have not seen Paradise Lost. You know, we are getting Lanterns. We are getting Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. And by the way, this answer will probably be answered once we actually see Lanterns and we actually see Supergirl and we actually see Clayface. Because if we see Lanterns and it feels like Peacemaker, it feels like Superman, it feels like Guardians of the Galaxy. You know, we see like Aaron Pierre in an orgy and he's saying F you and F that and look at my dick or whatever we want to classify James Gunn's humor as. If we see Lanterns and it is more of the same, then I will be forced to sit here and be like, yeah, that what this guy's reporting is probably true. If we see Supergirl and it's more James Gunn type stuff, then I will kind of be forced to look at this article and be like, oh yeah, that's probably true. If we see Clayface and it's not really a horror movie, but it's like a goofy comedy with Clayface, then again, I'll be like, yeah, I mean, that's probably true. But I mean, if we actually get to Lanterns and it turns out that is a true detective-inspired cop show starring a couple of Green Lanterns, if we see Supergirl and it is meaningfully different from Superman, if we see Clayface and it actually feels like a proper horror movie, then I won't necessarily buy what he's writing there, which is that James Gunn is meddling with people's creative visions. But I mean, like, and also like to the point of like, yeah, visionary directors don't really want to work with DC. I mean, yeah, like that's probably true, but I mean, that just makes sense because if you're like a big director like Denis Villeneuve, it's like, yeah, you probably don't want to work within a cinematic universe. But I don't necessarily think that that's just because Gunn is meddling in people's projects. Like, if you are making a cinematic universe, it is a good thing that you are meddling in people's projects to a certain extent. Because you need to be able to connect a universe in a way that makes sense. Like, it does not make sense to have a cinematic universe and then give your creatives complete creative autonomy. That just doesn't make sense. That would be an unreasonable expectation. So I don't necessarily know to what degree this is a problem, I guess is what I'm saying. But we're going to have to wait and see to find out. Oh, yeah, and you have to imagine that Zack Snyder is like, he doesn't want to come back. I don't think he does. Would Ben Affleck, would Henry Cavill at this point, would Gal Gadot, would they really want to come back? I feel like it's just been so long. You know, Warner Brothers has played with poor Henry Cavill's little British heart so many times. I feel like they wouldn't even want to come back. I don't know. I don't think it would make sense for Zack Snyder's Snyderverse to come back at this point. I'm told that if Warner Brothers gets sold, that whoever buys it wants a complete new start. I mean, this line is also weird. I'm told that if Warner Brothers gets sold, that whoever buys it wants a complete new start. What do you mean whoever buys it? How would you know that if you're not talking about a specific company? You see, like that line is a little weird. It's like, what are that sounds like you're just kind of the people are just spitting information at you. And it's like, we need to know about specific people and if what those specific people, what their specific intentions are. While it has been reported that Skydance is eyeing to purchase WB Discovery, I'm told Universal Comcast is still in the mix. I know they've been eyeing Warner Brothers Discovery for years. What I'm told, if David Ellison buys Warner Brothers Discovery, is that James Gunn will be out. David Ellison's father, billionaire David Ellison, is close to President Donald Trump. So Peacemaker isn't getting a season 3, and Gunn lied about a family-friendly approach to DC. So, I mean, that's, again, I don't think that that's a lie. Since the beginning of at least when we, the public, have known about DC Studios, he's always mentioned that the DC universe is he wants it to have completely different tones. He wants the DC universe to have R-rated stuff, to have PG-13 rated stuff. I mean, you're just stupid if you look at Peacemaker season 1 and James Gunn tells you that he's going to be making a Peacemaker season 2, and then you do the surprise Pikachu face and go, wait, but I thought this was family friendly. What? That's on you. if there's some like studio executive that's like, I thought that this was all going to be family friendly. You're just an idiot for not listening properly. I'm told that nobody in the building knows his status except for Gunn himself, but his action speak as to what might happen. What does this mean? Nobody in the building knows his status except for Gunn himself? I thought you were telling us what his status was going to be. I thought you were telling us that his status is that if David Ellison buys the company, that he's going to get fired. What do you mean nobody knows what his status is? You were telling us what his status is. So again, a lot of this, some of this article is just weird. It's a little confusingly written, which is just like another reason why I don't know if we should take it too seriously. Again, it's obvious, and Gunn has said it himself. He's doing whatever he wants with DC. It's because with the sale, his DCU will be dead. And not to mention, but like this, look at this article. Related, Donald Trump making Superman great again. Wait, what is this? I'm kind of curious. We once again have... What? Is this the same guy? This is the same guy. We once again have President Donald Trump to thank for making entertainment, Hollywood, and pop culture great again. And this time it's about DC and Superman. He's talking about how if David Ellison buys Skydance, then he's going to make stuff more conservative. I mean, look, again, I think this is cringe as all hell, but look, if his scoop is right, his scoop is right. I mean, it is what it is, right? And it's obvious. And Gunn has said it himself. He's doing whatever he wants. Oh, I'd already read that. Back to David Ellison. I'm told Mike DeLuca will take over DC. Recall how my insiders told you about the real ending of The Flash, which is something Gunn completely changed. DeLuca wanted to bring back Zack Snyder's DCEU, which would have in part led to the return of Henry Cavill as Superman and the return of Ben Affleck as Batman with a Batman multiverse happening. I mean, Mike DeLuca might have been the head of DC, but I mean, we already knew that what was going to end up happening was that The Rock was going to be like the technically he was going to be the head of DC, which, look, say what you will about James Gunn. Can we all not agree that The Rock being in charge of DC would have been an even bigger disaster? Like, are you really going to sit here and say, like, okay, even if you hate James Gunn, are you really going to sit here and say that you think the DCU should be centered around Superman and Black Adam? Let's be for real. That all got scrapped when Gunn took over the DC. Oh, by the way, what did this mean? The return of Ben Affleck as Batman with a Batman multiverse happening. Oh, I guess it would have been the same as what allegedly is about to happen, which is they were going to continue the Matt Reeves Batman, but then also continue the Ben Affleck Batman. I mean, that to be fair, that is what's happening, and we're going to see if that ends up being a good choice or not. That all got scrapped when Gunn took over the DCU. I am of the opinion that Gunn knew about the eventual sale of WB Discovery, and that Zaslav handed him over the reins and gave him the ability to do whatever he wants before the sale. They just want DC content out there to make the sale of WBD look better. Like, it's also just like a weird way of framing it. Like, I am of the opinion that James Gunn knew that there might be a sale of Warner Brothers Discovery, and David Zaslav just gave him the reins in order to make DC look better. And it's just like, okay. Let's say there wasn't going to be a sale. What is the difference between how James Gunn would have handled things versus if there wasn't a sale? He would have been handed the reins, or it would have been up to James Gunn to make DC content. And yes, it is in order to make successful movies and make DC look better. That would have been the goal either way. Like, he's trying to like frame this as a negative thing. And it's also one of those things where he's like, they're framing it as a negative thing of like, James Gunn is, he's able to do whatever he wants. And it's like, well, yeah, that should be how it is. Whoever is in charge of a cinematic universe, like, there needs to be accountability, and there needs to be a guy who's ultimately in charge of everything. That's the only way cinematic universes are going to work, at least in my opinion, right? You need a guy who, at the end of the day, is going to put his foot down and say, hey, this is what our universe is. Now, if he's a good leader, he's obviously going to take advice from people. He's going to take criticism, and maybe James Gunn isn't doing that. But just the very nature of James Gunn has creative control over DC, that's not a negative thing, is what I'm saying. Back to DeLuca and DC, I'm told he won't be bringing back the Snyderverse as everyone has moved on. He'll be starting a new DC universe under David Ellison at Skydance. And my guess will bring back Truth, Justice, and the American Way. That will be insane. Like, could you imagine that? Could you imagine yet another reboot? That would be such a stupid decision. If that's what their intention is, then already this DeLuca guy is an idiot and he doesn't know what he's doing. The notion that you're going to do another reboot, bring us, like, recast another Superman. Presumably by this point, if what they're saying is true, and James Gunn is, like, shifting gears to try to, like, do everything that he wants to do before the sale happens, then by the time this happens, we will have a new Wonder Woman and we will have a new Batman. So this guy is telling us, and maybe he's right, and maybe it's DeLuca that's the idiot. This guy is telling us that DeLuca's plan is going to be to recast Superman, recast the new Batman, and recast the new Wonder Woman yet again. If they want to replace James Gunn, then whatever, fair enough. They can do what they want to do. I sincerely hope that the plan is to get rid of James Gunn, but continue on with David Cornsweet and continue on with whoever the new Batman is and continue on with whoever the new Wonder Woman is. Because to do a brand new recasting, that just sounds awful, quite frankly. We also know Gunn's history with the conservatives. But again, this guy's just not a good writer. We also know Gunn's history with the conservatives. It's like, what are you doing, bro? Which also likely explains Gunn's DCU agenda. He's getting it all out there before the sale. Mike DeLuca discovered David S. Goyer, who is known for Blade, Man of Steel, and of course Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. Mike also brought in Sinners and Weapons and oversaw the Conjuring franchise, also added Minecraft. He knows cinema, history, and global movements. What does that mean? He knows cinema, history, and global movements. Okay. It's like, hey, this guy's going to run DC. Don't worry. He knows about global movements. Well, okay. And is a diehard comic book fan, the insiders said. Okay, so yeah, that's the article. Look, all I'm saying is take it with a grain of salt. This guy could be reporting accurately. And we'll see what happens, you know? Like, honestly, before this article, my take on Paramount buying Warner Brothers was that they would keep James Gunn. Because in my opinion, the important project that he's released so far is Superman. And that was a success. So yeah, I mean, I think you really have to wait and see, what does his Wonder Woman look like? That's going to be a big marker. What does his Batman look like? That's going to be a big marker. The good thing is that regardless of what happens, I assume Matt Reeves is going to be safe. I assume they're just going to let Matt Reeves do his thing. Thank God. But yeah, we'll see. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.